Thanks. That was just to get you warmed up here. Thank you, Tony. This is my brother Tony Redhorse. His, my other brother, his father, Kenny Redhorse, is sitting up front, and Maya Luna will also be singing with us today. I'm gonna be a little more formal and we'll go by the standard academic introduction.
Well, thank you again. So this is, I see many familiar faces tonight, and it's beautiful to see this two community of my life merging right here in this room. A lot of people from the Native American Church, and I'm very thankful to you guys and happy to see you here. And many people that have been following us through our ERIE events. For those of you who are new to our space, what we do here with ERIE is entheogenic research, integration, and education. Meaning we are here to support and sponsor a dialogue about these ways of knowing, these ways of healing, these ways of praying. And I'm very interested in the educational part of our project. I am the one who kind of called for this lecture tonight, for this talk, for having Harry here, and for having Harry for a very specific reason. Because Harry is a medicine man on one hand, but he's also a scholar. And I thought that it was going to be the best blend to bring into our space a dialogue that can bridge the traditional indigenous way of knowing with a academic voice. And you know, I'm very emotional because for me this talk tonight means many things. On one hand, it means to affirm my voice into this group, into the school, and into this path of knowing. But more than anything for me tonight represents a way to honor this medicine, this teacher, Peyote, who has been changing my life and has been revealing many things to me about the way of relations. So I'm very, very honored and happy to have you here, all of you. And I'm sure that what you're gonna feel here tonight, it's what I feel in my heart, in my spirit, every time I sit with these people, and I sit with the songs, and I sit with this medicine. And I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. And I'm not gonna say much about Harry because it's very good to introduce himself. In fact, last night I asked him, what am I gonna say about you? And he said, don't say anything, just say that I ordered sushi. Yeah. So that's what I'm gonna say about him. But I'm sure that many of you know him already in many ways, and the rest of you will get the chance to appreciate his very powerful voice. And I'm very happy to say, here's Harry Quintero.
Thank you, Toddy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Don't let the talk of academics scare you. This is going to be a very organic evening, and we're going to have some fun. And we're going to have some fun talking about one of my favorite subjects, Azechopa. In Apache, that means the holy medicine. Eze is medicine. Jopa is the holy one. There's many names for medicine. There's Eze. There's we'll go on and on, but the story of tonight is the story of Peyote and the American voice. And that is a huge story. It's a story that many of us as Americans were not even cognizant of how medicine, specifically this Peyote and specifically indigenous lifeways, enter into our understanding of who we are as a people, who we are as a nation, and how we represent ourselves as human beings. Let me just backtrack a little since we were talking about all the wonderful names of Peyote, and I'm going to talk from over here because I don't believe in killing too many trees, and I should have printed this out. The story of the Peyote and the American voice is one that starts with the very languages that encountered Peyote. The story of Peyote starts with an indigenous voice or an indigenous language, or languages really I should say. And when we dive back into the realm of the experiential with, say, the academics of sociocultural anthropology, we all know and love Richard Evans Schultes, if you're an ERIE student, because Richard Evans Schultes was one of the father of entheogenic research. And he wrote in 1938 that one of the fundamental important ideas that came to all indigenous people as they began to encounter this peyote out of the peyote's original growth range was that this peyote, this medicine, would take on the indigenous language that was encountered. So for instance, if, like, say, when the Delaware came into this peyote, they called it Tsum, which in their language is a word that predates the introduction of peyote, and it means in their language medicine. And then when we get back to Taos, we'll say Walea, and when we go to Comanche, we can say Paukit, and when we go to Omaha, the Omaha language, we can say Mankan. The important thing here is that we're always encountering an acceptance of this peyote, of this holy medicine, in a universal acceptance by Native people that this has a healing, curing property to it. Now, I can speak about my own personal experience with language, and I'll go out of the realm of Apache, and I will look to my southern brethren down in southern Arizona, who had a trade route that would have and did interrelate with the Huida or the Huichol or the Cora and the Tarahumara down in north central Mexico. Why is this important? This is important that we look at the Occum language because we can see how language operates before and after the Spanish are encountered by indigenous people. One of the first words that the Pima or the Occum used for peyote is hekuli, which is very similar to the Huida word hekuri. And it gets more interesting when you look at the Occum word for peyote again, and one of the words that is used most commonly is Beyu. And why is that significant? Why is it important that we understand the word peyote as Beyu? Because Beyu also has other meanings. Beyu also means baby saguaro. And Beyu also means ghost medicine. Why is this important? Because this is a living, breathing example of how indigenous languages root themselves to a place and a space in geography. And when you understand that there is a language being born out of a certain land area, you begin to understand the interdependency of indigenous people relating, trading, and having an obligation to interface with the natural environment in a way that is peaceful, coexisting, and also has a reciprocity quality. Or rather, it gives them the ability to trade and move outside of those areas. That's why it's important to reflect back on Richard Evans Schultes' work in 1938. It's also important to reflect back there into the story of where does peyote come? Where does it come in? Okay, if Schultes is talking about it in 1938, there's got to be another answer of when did peyote become part of the American voice? And, you know, some people will say, oh, well, it happened with the beats. Oh, it must have happened in maybe 1964. I mean, this is one of the things I found in the Smithsonian. There's a little postcard from a man named Weston LaBar who wrote the Peyote Code. And he's writing to one of his best friends, who happens to be Allen Ginsberg. And he writes in October 1964, "Dear Weston, rushed. Peter and I are going to spend a week as guests in the Lowell House in Cambridge, and I have to prepare a manuscript. So I have not had time to reply or respond. The peyote in the new edition and your notes will write soon. Spent a weekend with Bob Dylan, ravishing sweet folk singer. You ever hear of his records? Fine poet kid too. Best, Al." The postcard actually goes on, but if you take the date October 7, 1964, and follow the timeline, and then you follow the correspondences between Weston LaBar and Ginsberg, you'll see that Weston LaBar and Allen Ginsberg were actually old college buddies. And here there's an accessibility issue. All of these stories are already right before us. Over in the Stanford archives, you have a lot of Allen Ginsberg's personal articles, his record collection, some of his notes, his journals. When you go through that, if you choose to, it's only right across the water, you'll open a box of records, and in that box of records, you will see a 4-record set by Smithsonian Folkways of Kiowa folk songs. Why is that important? It's not that important unless you're researching. You can pick up that album, and with your own hands, you can see pencil corrections on the liner notes of the Smithsonian Folkways, where Allen Ginsberg is correcting the spellings of people in the Kozak family. He's correcting spellings of Kiowa language, and he is being very acute in how he translates these Kiowa songs on this album liner. Now, not a big deal. You like Kiowa music. You like peyote. It's not a big deal until you consider some of the things that were said about Howe. A lot of people look at Howe and they say, well, that's the start of the American confessional movement in poetry. A lot of people look at Howe and they say, that's the story of one of the most definitive poems of the beat movement. And yet, when you listen to the public radio interview with Allen Ginsberg, he goes right out and says, I wrote the second part of Howe under the influence of the holy medicine, under the influence of peyote. Well, not a big deal again, until you go back and you recognize that Allen Ginsberg had a grounded relationship, a long-standing relationship, not only with the peyote, but with indigenous people that assists and continue to have a relationship with this peyote and exude a voice of what it means to be human and alive and natural. This goes on. It goes on farther. So we don't stop at 63. Okay, we'll go farther back. We'll go to 52. Now that doesn't work. Okay, let's go back to 1859. Yeah, that's Henry Halleck Ellis. Do any of you know who Ellis was? He, let's imagine that we were in England, London in 1859. I did that once and then I did some research and then I decided that I didn't want to imagine I was there. Between 1800 and 1900, the nation state of Great Britain experienced a 100% increase in coal combustion due to power large factories and the revolution of the industrial colonialism began to erode the health in its capital. Between 1873 and 1892, there were as many as 2,800 deaths attributed to 3 major smog events. One in 1909 that killed over 1,000 people from the effects of air pollution. So let's not imagine too hard. But we get back to that point, and Ellis at the time was conducting experiments with peyote that he had received through a friend of his in the United States, and wrote a very obscure, very small study in the British Medical Journal at the time. There are two poets of great importance that openly experimented with Alice during this time. And I think one of them, my MFA is in poetry, had some significance to how we define ourselves as far as the joy in life and poetry. His name was Y.B. Yeats. That was one of the poets. Another poet was, I think his name was Andrew. No, that's the other one. It's in here, but there's some debate on whether it's Y.B. Yeats's testimony or this other poet. But really, that's kind of ubiquitous, because the fact is that even within the European theater of how we speak, this peyote was there. Now, when we get back to that, okay, well, it's not 1859. It's not the 1800s. Peyote was there before that. And before there was the Spanish coming across the water, there was already this relationship with this holy medicine. And there were already sounds that went with it. This is one of them. Hapalinomane, 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 doyolo tatsin. This is very southern in its sensibility to a peyote ceremony. This sound right here. Now, imagine yourself as a man of the cloth. Well, maybe we don't want to imagine ourselves right here. There's an awful lot of problems. But imagine yourself trying to bring your cultural cosmology to a group of indigenous people who already have a notion of what it means to be human and alive, and what it means to have a relationship with the earth and a larger creative force. One of the things that was said in many of the letters that went back to the Vatican is there is no possible way that we are going to convert these heathen Indians to the ways of Catholicism unless we accept this sacrament that they call peyote, and unless we accept their dance and their worship of this sacrament that they call peyote. And here is an introduction to what happens when two cultures collide. I like to use a term that I coined a cross-cultural undercurrent. And I think some of you like to surf. It's the same idea when you have something so powerful sweeping over you that there is no chance of getting away from that wave. And yet, you're in control. You have a relationship with something that is so powerful that it cannot be taken away from your spiritual memory. And that force is all the water that is pushing right under that wave. And that is the same resistance that you find in the resistance to colonialism. That's why I like to call it a cross-cultural undertone. Now, imagine that they brought Baroque instruments. This is not a big deal. They have vihuelas, they have the bajo sexto, they have guitars. There is already an indigenous tradition of stringed instruments. You can look at the Apache violin, you can look at the Huita violin, the Tarahumara violin. All these stringed instruments existed at the time. So it was no stranger to pick up instruments. So here you have the intonations of this Baroquean sound meeting the rhythms of the indigenous voice, and you come up with a sound it sounds like this. This is a ceremony recorded in southern Texas. These are called velorios. This is, if you listen to the lyrics, this relative of mine is singing to the rain as the rain is falling down. This is the sound of two cultures colliding. Now, this is a beautiful thing. This is a testimony to how people come together. It gets bigger than that because you hear the guitar on this. It's a very simple dun-dun. There was once a man named Woody Guthrie. He said that everything that he needed to learn about playing the guitar, he learned from listening to one person. That was Leadbelly. For those of you who follow jazz and blues, what's the difference between Leadbelly compared to the people from Knobs? It's a different rhythm. It's a different sound with that string instrument. Why is Leadbelly having that different sound? Leadbelly is from South Texas. Leadbelly grew up around Catholic Church. This is Leadbelly's introduction to the string rhythm of the indigenous sound. This is what Woody picks up in Oklahoma, and then we follow the quotes after that. I think Bob Dylan said everything that he needed to learn about guitar, he learned from Woody Guthrie. And then there were the Beatles, and we'll get into that a little more later. They also said that they learned an awful lot of guitar off of Bob Dylan, and it goes back to these songs. Now these songs, counter them in a natural space and place in Texas, come from Cochiliteco people, they come from Lipan Apache people, they come from people who accepted the mission system. And to quote one of my elders and one of my fellow Deacon in Sibique, Arizona, Mac Nosey, it was real easy for us to just let this Catholic Church come in here. Us Apaches, those Catholics, we make the same symbols. North Star. So this is part of the expression of beauty that you can see in paintings and say in churches in Mescalero and other places in South Texas. But getting back to that sound, Tony, if you could help me out. In these ceremonies, there's dancing. There's a fire that's usually taken up with candles. There's not a fire like you would have in Native American churches. And they use ash to make symbols that they dance around. But when all that's well and done, and when the velorio ceremony is taking a break, when you dance, people need breaks. They invite, blankets are good. They invite traditional peyote people, or I shouldn't say traditional, I should say non-missionized peyote people, to come and sing between dance breaks. And I'm going to sing you some Apache songs now that are in the tradition of their tonality are more representative of an older sound, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not sung today. But even the experience of this peyote music has changed over the years, and we'll get more into that later when we touch back on the 60s in a few minutes here. And I know I'm skipping around a lot, but I said we were going to be organic and we were going to have some fun. These are some other songs that come from the Gulf Coast area. My brother's going to sing some of those for you. These are traditionally people that would also have peyote in their home spaces. So enjoy. So that gives you an example of what's happening in Texas. And that goes on. That goes on into the movement and the growth of America. That goes on into the Mexican-American War. And that furthers the dissemination of peyote into the Southern Plains area, where you have Cheyenne, you have Arapaho, you have Oto, you have, and later because of migration and because of the push for a national reservation, you have Shawnee, you have Delaware, you have Lenape, you have people from the eastern seaboard settling into Oklahoma. And that goes further into how we see how peyote has affected the American voice. How many of you are familiar with Sampson Occum as a writer, as a Native American writer? Not many people, right? You'll see Sampson Occum in the Heath Anthology of American Literature. You'll see Sampson Occum in the Norton Anthology of Literature. And the reason why these anthologies of literature say that Sampson Occum is so important is that he's one of the first natives who writes in English, and that is that's a feat, I guess you could say. But as I go on to point out in this chapter that I write about Sampson Occum is he's really not followed that much on the reservation. And his people were the Brotherton Indians. You don't see, and to this day, that they still have a settlement that's near the Ho-Chunk Reservation in Wisconsin. And I can tell you, I've been there. You don't see, young native kids with Occum and Old English stenciled across their back. It just doesn't happen that way. There's not a jarring following of Occum, and now that I finally found the pages here, I'll be able to show you why there isn't. We're going to try and sing a Sampson Occum song here, if I can pull it out. It's on page 22. I've tried this before, and it really hasn't worked out for me, but we'll try it out one more time. I'm going through a huge translation. Here we go. I won't even bother Tony with this one, because I just don't think we can make it sound. Okay, if you all could try and join me with this song, just try and follow along. Oh, throughout the Savior's life we trace nothing but shame and deep disgrace. No period else is seen till a spotless victim fell, tasting in soul a painful hell, caused by the creature's sin. On a cold ground, methinks my Jesus kneel and pray for me. Oh, that kind of hurts. Yeah, that's not going to work. I'm afraid that the only way you're going to get people in this day and age to sing along to Sampson Occum is you'd have to wear even more black than me. You'd have to have some sort of disco ball and flames coming off the stage. Maybe if you took it to heavy metal. But yeah, rockabilly, that might work. But it's not going to happen when you try and sing Sampson Occum. People do not sing Sampson Occum songs anymore. Well, then why is Sampson Occum important? Sampson Occum is important because Sampson Occum tells a story and continues to tell the story of movement and genocide. And within that genocide, the encountering of this holy medicine once again, and that holy medicine's ability to heal people that have entered into a realm of drastic alienation. Sampson Occum in his lifetime believed that if he followed the teachings of this Christ that was presented to him, that his people would one day be unified with all native people in prayer. That was his vision. He wanted to start a Christian colony. And he did. Unfortunately, it was near where the colonists already wanted to have their colony too. And when they ran out of room, they approached Sampson Occum and the Brotherton Indians and they said, hey, you guys got to move. Yeah, we know you're Christians. Yeah, we know you're like us, but you're not quite like us. We need this space for our relationship with God. We need this space for our relationship with our Lord and personal Savior. Such as the story goes. But tell you what we're going to do. We're going to make you more like us. We're going to help you hire some mercenaries. We're going to get you some guns. And we're going to send you off with God's speed, God's vision. And when you find some piece of land that you like, you got these mercenaries. You got these guns. Take it for yourself. That will be the promised land that God promised you. And so the Brotherton Indians headed off, and they headed off to the lake areas of Wisconsin. And in that area, they found a small woodland band of people they called the Ho-Chunk Winnebago. Why is that important? Well, the Ho-Chunk Winnebago were displaced. And when the Ho-Chunk Winnebago were displaced, they came into these tools. Now, something very interesting about the Ho-Chunk, there's very few native people on this continent. My brother, the Beatnik, the Apaches, and the Ho-Chunk are the only tribes that I know of besides the Yaqui and some of the other southern tribes. But they more often than not use a water drum that is made out of a gourd and placed into a tub. But there are very few native people on this continent that utilize this water drum. The Ho-Chunk instantly recognized this instrument. And once again, there came another word for peyote. And this time, it was medicine again. And this time, it was the Ho-Chunk. And why is that important? Well, because the Brotherton Indians were very Christian. They loved Christianity. They breathed it, they exuded it. And, you know, native people are just like any other people. Once you get to know them, you get two different families, put them right next to each other, eventually somebody falls in love. Eventually you have children. And when those Ho-Chunks were displaced, it had already happened. There had been some Brotherton Indians that fell in love with Ho-Chunks. There had been some Ho-Chunks that fell in love with Brotherton Indians. This Christian sound, this sensibility, that was one of the first places that it entered into this Native American church sound, besides the Velorios of South Texas. Now this brings us to another story in that same area. I love to tell this story. My brother knows what song I'm talking about. And we're still in the Civil War era. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Lincoln film. And we all love to remember how Lincoln emancipated the slaves. And this is no criticism on Lincoln. Also historically, things happened, and he was trying to mitigate what was happening. But the Lakota uprising was not for any unknown reason. People were starving to death, and there were angry teenagers, as there always are, and people died. But the other side of the story is that in the beginning, before Lincoln was involved, there were over 400 people, men, women, and children, that were sentenced to death by a kangaroo court. Kangaroo court meaning a court where no one has any chance of being found not guilty. After President Lincoln reviewed the cases, he found all but 36 of those people innocent. Now there's still the problem with the people of Mankato, Minnesota, and the need for vengeance, and so they decided to hang 2 other men who weren't on the roster and a 13-year-old girl the day after Christmas. You can look at journals of that time, and you can hear people, or you can read people talking about how Christmas night people were singing Silent Night, Holy Night in town the day before the execution on December 26, 1863. And that gets to another part of the story, how people fall in love, how they marry, how they make a concerted vision to bring their families together and understand what it means to be human and alive. And there was a man named John Rebel. The song we're about to sing is a memorial song. It's a memorial song, and you can look at this song holding up the tradition that we see in, say, some of the songs that we hold near and dear today, like Bob Marley's Redemption Song. Or Lord knows we've had a lot of tragedy with law enforcement. We can look at Bruce Springsteen's 41 Shots. This has the same kind of weight. Why does that have that same weight with Joseph Renville? Let me explain some of Joseph Renville. Joseph Renville was a traitor. Not a traitor as in he traded against people, but he worked at a trading post. Had a beautiful, beautiful Lakota mother. And his father was Black French. And he was committed to the Christian religion. And he was also committed to his people. He loved the Lakota. And he loved his father's religion as well. And one of his greatest feats that he participated in throughout his life was translating Christian songs that were popular at the time. And these songs, all of them, are referred to, in a singing sensibility or a singing style, they're referred to as John Revelle songs, but they don't refer to them as John Revelle songs. Within the indigenous tradition, which the Lakota obviously also follow, a lot of times songs are named after people, but the people's names are named. What they're named after is the place that that person was from. These specific songs are referred to as Lakopale, which in a pidgin kind of French Lakota means the lake that speaks. This song that we're about to sing is been credited with being translated into more native languages around the world than any other song. And after we sing this song, we'll tell you why this song is so powerful, but I'm sure you'll feel it. Yeah, go ahead. Finish it off.
Burn
songs or some Kiowa songs. There you go. These are some other songs that come from the Gulf Coast area. My brother's going to sing some of those for you. These are traditionally people that would also have peyote in their home space. So enjoy.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, brother. It's a beautiful presentation, bringing in the voice of the native people of this land. I especially appreciated hearing about this revitalization of language, of native language, and young people especially, and reclaiming that culture. So yeah, thank you so much for these stories and these ways. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just want to point out too, this is a cultural revitalization that is not just for Native American people. And to give a quick story, I and other Native people were asked by the U.S. State Department and the government of Estonia to work with people that were artists, journalists, victims of torture under the former Soviet Union. Very briefly, we ran a series of sweat lodges and peyote meetings over there for those Estonians that had suffered under that type of tyranny. One of the things that I witnessed was an Estonian man who began singing a song in his language of Estonian to the teepee, which in his language has the same name as their traditional house, which is made out of bark, but it has the same shape. It's called Quanah. And then he went on to sing to the fire and to the water in his own Estonian language. This medicine in this way has a way to remind everybody where they came from and what their relation is. So thank you for that comment, I appreciate that. But I want to share that as well to express that this is not exclusive to Native people. Thank you. Any other questions?
Maybe I had a quick question.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about, you sang a number of different songs, as well as other people of many different languages, different tribes, and one of the things, other than them being medicine songs, that ties them all together is there's a lot of common syllables, like words in that that I recognize. And I wonder if you could just talk about that for a moment, like how that, what those words mean.
I will briefly, and that's part of the beauty of, and I will in this sense, that part of the beauty of human beings coming together is that naturalization process where we learn each other's languages. And so I myself, as a Native American church practitioner, feel intensely lucky that when I was younger, I had an affinity for a Lakota man who was a great medicine man, passed before I had come into the church, but his name was Rufus Highhawk, Indian, or outside of the church they used to call him Rufus Killscrow Indian. That's actually his real name, but in the teepee we don't like to talk about those things, so we call Highhawk, because it's a high hawk that gets the crow. Anyway, he passed on. The Lakota, a lot of the Lakota songs that I sing are attributed to Rufus Killscrow. The reason that I know them is because that man inspired me with his journey that he presented this world, this earth before I came. And I wanted to know what it felt like to be him. I wanted to know what it felt like to help people. And so one of the first things I graduated towards was his songs. That's part of the vocability of it. That's a way you honor someone, to learn how to say hello, goodbye in their language, to learn how to say thank you in their language. And that continues on today. It's common sense that most of our mothers and fathers taught us, but as we grow older, we forget, especially in this contemporary sensibility of what we call culture. I'll say another thing briefly, that some of the songs that we sing, there's a vocable in there. For instance, a lot of Apache songs will just say one vocable, like for instance, ya. And even though ya is said, and that's a very familiar vocable, when you're Apache and you've been initiated into that song, you'll know that it's short for something like Yatakla or Dark Heaven. And if you know that, the song becomes a different modality. But if you don't, you can still sing it the same way and it still works. So there are native songs with vocables that have certain nuances for specific tribes, but that doesn't preclude other people from singing them or learning them. It'd be the same thing for me thinking that because I can sing Lakota songs, that I understand them from the same emotional perspective as a Lakota, and that's just not possible. But I can appreciate it by continuing to strive to understand that from my own singing, from my own process of singing to a larger creation. Yes?
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you said about the medicine man that you knew, whose name was, in one context it was Killscrow, and the other one was Highhawk. What is the mythology around the killing of a crow and a medicine man?
Well, it's not so much the killing of a crow, but have you ever been up to Montana? Okay, have you ever been near the Crow Reservation?
No.
Those guys are huge! They're like giant. I'm not exaggerating. They're some of the largest Native people I know on this continent. And the reason why that was a very, a name to be endeavored, a name to be connoitered and understood in that time, was that if you were Lakota and you killed a crow, that was a big deal. That's like saying, I killed a grizzly bear with a 22. It doesn't often happen. But yet, it also shows something about the understanding of metaphor within the indigenous sensibility. I don't want to hurt the crow's feelings. Yeah, we had war one time, but man, we get along good now. Boy, I sure like the way she looks. I think I'm going to start saying high hawk. Because it's the high hawk that gets the crow. If you follow the natural sensibility of these feathers again. Crows, hawks, they don't get along. I hope that answers your question with a little bit of humor. Other questions? No other questions? This means it's time to sing, Kenny. We gotta sing. You guys. Watch these guys knock it out. They're really, really good.
Aho. Aho.